Hello everyone, this is Shrevin from Ultrawide, the channel focusing on the implementation of ultra-wide resolutions in video games. Today we're looking at Batman Arkham Asylum. This game was developed by Rocksteady Studios and was first released in 2009 using Unreal Engine 3. Despite this game being more than a decade old, its visual style and gameplay still hold up very well today, but that's neither here nor there in the context of this video. As you can see from the main menu right now, the game is already taking proper advantage of my ultra-wide display. For context, I am currently running this game on a 21:9 aspect ratio monitor with a resolution of 3440 by 1440, or 1440p ultra-wide as I'll refer to it. But in order for the game to get to this point, there were a few hoops that needed jumping through. Let's rewind a bit to the startup of the game. Before you even start up Batman Arkham Asylum, you'll have to set your ultrawide monitor as your primary monitor, otherwise this game will not launch in full screen on the ultrawide monitor. Of course, this isn't a problem if your ultrawide monitor is your only monitor, but in my case, my ultrawide monitor is generally my second monitor, as you can see here, so I had to switch it to my primary monitor for this particular game in order for the game to be able to launch on this monitor at all. Once you've configured your monitors properly, you'll be able to start up Batman Arkham Asylum. When you first start up the game, in this case from Steam, you'll be greeted with this launcher. While it may seem innocent enough at first glance, there are a couple issues that arise. One is that the options presented in this launcher are not present in-game, which means if you want to change any of these options once in-game, even something as simple as resolution, it'll require a restart of the game. Secondly, once you access the settings menu like I have, the game will be locked to 62 frames per second, even if you don't change any of these options. To unlock the frame rate, you'll need to manually edit the bmengine.ini file before launching the game, or use the Arkham Asylum Advanced Launcher. This information was obtained from the PC Gaming Wiki, an excellent resource, so I'll have their Arkham Asylum page linked in the description. If you don't configure your INI file to be read-only, you'll have to be sure to never access the settings from the launcher again, or you'll re-enable the 62 frames per second cap. For the purpose of this video, since I am trying to showcase the game as, quote, out of the box as possible, I won't be using the advanced launcher or any mods, but I will be editing the frame cap in the INI file. Additionally, in the settings menu, you'll notice that the resolutions, specifically the 21:9 resolutions, are showing up here. As I mentioned before, these resolutions would not be showing up if my ultrawide monitor was not set up as my primary monitor. In terms of a setting menu, there are four things I generally look for. One is a monitor selector. If you're running multiple monitors, some games give you the option to pick which monitor you want to run the game on. In the settings menu, that option is not present. A second thing is an aspect ratio selector, whether you want to run the game at 16:9 or 21:9. While the aspect ratios are listed in this resolution option, there is no explicit aspect ratio selection, so it's kinda there, but not explicitly so. Number 3 is a resolution selector that includes both 21:9 and 16:9 resolutions. This game does have that, luckily, though it does require assigning your ultrawide to be the primary monitor, as I mentioned before. And number 4 is a UI position option, where the user can choose to position the UI at the edge or in the center of the screen. Such an option allows ultrawide users to not have to move their eyes all across the screen for UI elements. This is a relatively newer option, so I don't fault Arkham Asylum for not having it, but I put the criteria here to indicate to you that this is something I do look for in games. So, in conclusion, looking at the settings menu, Arkham Asylum has technically two of those criteria that I mentioned before in the settings menu. Once we're actually in-game, we can see that the game leaves a pretty strong first impression with its ultrawide implementation. As you can see, the game is taking full advantage of that 21:9 aspect ratio, and that continues to be the case through various other UI elements here. As you can see, the keyboard controls here are listed in the full aspect ratio instead of being shortened to maybe where a 16:9 display would end. And if we continue going through these menus, we can see if we go into challenge mode, for instance, the UI extends to take advantage of the 21:9 display again. With that said, there are a couple oddities that we can discover here. For instance, this bat screen that we're about to witness is in 16:9, and it looks a little awkward when it's on an ultra-wide display, but that's relatively minor. The other oddity that we notice here is cutscene pillar boxing. This isn't entirely unusual, especially since the cutscenes are pre-rendered and locked at 30 frames per second, but it can take away from the immersion slightly. When transitioning from a cutscene to gameplay, as you just saw there, the game first employs a 16:9 in-engine shot before gradually expanding the scene to the full resolution. This is the case at both 3440 by 1440 and 6000 by 1440. Speaking of 6000 by 1440, I was able to make this resolution using AMD's Eyefinity tool. This allows me to combine both of my monitors to make one single monitor. So in this case, I'm combining my 21:9 1440p display and my 16:9 1440p display to create essentially a 37:9 1440p display, or 6000 by 1440. Consequently, I can choose to render this game at a very wide 6000 by 1440 if I so choose. However, we can glean some additional oddities in this mode as well. When the game is normally running in 16:9 or 21:9, these are what the menu backgrounds and cutscenes might look like. However, when we go into this super resolution, we can see that the backgrounds and cutscenes are zoomed in. For example, in the main menu that you're seeing right now, you'll see a very interesting angle of Batman that we don't normally see if we're running this game on 21:9 or 16:9. Additionally, we can also see that 6000 by 1440 just simply is too wide for the game to handle, as you can see from that transition there. And while these transitions don't take away from the moment-to-moment gameplay necessarily, it can take away from the experience because the cutscenes aren't presented as they were intended to be. However, in my eyes, 6000 by 1440 is such a comically large resolution for a game such as this that it might not be even a reasonable resolution to play the entire game in.
Is Commissioner Gordon here?
Yes, sir. He's waiting for you down at patient handover. He got here just before you did.
I measured performance between different resolutions in this game. My computer is decidedly mid-range for 2023, consisting of a Ryzen 9 3900X, a Radeon RX 6700 XT, a 1TB NVMe PCIe Gen 3 drive, and 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM at 3200 MHz. I chose the Sewerbat Extreme Challenge Mode map as my benchmark, going through its entirety 3 times and averaging the results to produce the graph you see here. Normally, the intention of this graph is to showcase the performance differential between a 16:9 resolution and a 21:9 resolution. In a more modern game, especially on this configuration, this differential would be more pronounced, but in Arkham Asylum, frame rates still stay quite high. Nonetheless, when we compare the results between 2560 by 1440 and 3440 by 1440, we see a 1.3% performance drop in average frame rates. When we compare 2560 by 1080 to 1920 by 1080, we see a 2% performance drop in average frame rates. Finally, when we compare the 6000 by 1440 to 2560 by 1440 results, we see a 27% drop in average frame rates, though frame rates were still quite high in both scenarios. Interestingly enough, running the game at 4360 by 1040, which is nearly 1080p at the extremely large aspect ratio, produced nearly similar results to normal 1080p results. I retested this a few times and the results did not change. However, it is worth noting that within the benchmark, there is a transition in between rounds that focuses on Batman. Normally, Batman is seen in full, but in the super ultra-wide ratio, only half of Batman can be seen, perhaps lessening the GPU load and producing a higher frame rate as a result. Regardless, frame rates in this game are very high, and the performance degradation from 16:9 to ultra-wide is very minimal. So how is Batman Arkham Asylum's ultra-wide implementation as a whole? Generally, when I play video games in ultra-wide, I do so because of the increased immersion and increased horizontal viewing distance in the game. Despite the lackluster options menu, generally you set the options once and never look at them again. With that said, I would consider Arkham Asylum's ultra-wide implementation to be good. It's not absolutely perfect due to the odd 16:9 transition screen and pillar-boxed cutscenes, and it's not very good due to how the options menu is implemented, but I would still consider it to be good, especially for a game of its time. Additionally, as we saw, while performance does expectedly drop when going from a 16:9 aspect ratio to 21:9, the frame rates are still very high and more than playable. Overall, I would rate the game's ultra-wide implementation as good. With that said, that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. If this video was informative to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more content like this. Additionally, please comment with other aspects of ultra-wide games that you would like to see covered. My testing process is evolving and I am open to feedback. With that said, this is Shrevin from Ultrawide, and I'll see you in the next one.